Welcome to the Modern Husbands podcast, where any combination of Dr. Bruce Ross, Christian Sherrill, and Brian Page host national experts who share winning ideas to manage money in the home as a team. I'm Brian Page, founder of Modern Husbands. Sometimes our listeners want more support than a podcast can give, individual or couple support, which I now provide. Details can be found at modernhusbands.com. Today's podcast is the first of a three-part series, Empowering Men to Partner or Lead at Home when She Earns More. Today's guests are Dr. Gary Barker, Ed Coambs, and Melissa Hogenboom. Dr. Barker is the president and CEO of Equimundo. He's an internationally recognized expert on engaging men and boys in gender equality work. Ed Coambs is a licensed marriage and family therapist, financial planner, and founder of Healthy Love and Money. He helps couples uncover the emotional roots of money stress, especially in relationships where earning dynamics are unequal. Melissa Hogenboom is a BBC journalist and author of the book Breadwinners, the next chapter of the fight for equality, which examines the social relational impact of female breadwinning. Our conversation will focus on overcoming the unique challenges and dynamics in female breadwinning relationships. Enjoy the show. Go ahead and start this conversation off with a question for Dr. Barker. You've worked with families across 40 countries. What are some universal patterns you see when women become the primary breadwinners?
It's still a pretty new thing, right? Most of us, our household situations were such that, and if you had a mom and dad at home, dad was the principal breadwinner, mom was the principal caregiver. There's like a generation change. And I think I think the universal is we've not caught up. When we ask men and women, how do you define, kind of manhood? There's lots of new stuff that's added to it. Being a friend, solving problems, resolving conflicts. But the top of it, 90% and above, no matter where we look, is I got to be a provider. So, men's I think we often want to frame that mostly as, well, that's about economics. And if she can provide, what does it matter? But it's about identity. It's about purpose. It's about how do others see me? And I think that the economics view of it, yes, we need it to support our families, but it's so much more for men and for women. And so, I think the first thing that comes to mind is tension, confusion, and sort of what else gives men identity. Fatherhood, caring for others, comes sort of 6 or 7 on a list of what they define as the most important when we say manhood. When we talk to them outside of a questionnaire, outside of, sort of that kind of framing and say, what matters to you? That's when, being a caregiver and the importance of that role, of just how that can reframe it for guys. And I do think even our language around primary, right? I think what we hear a lot more is, the nature of workplaces, lower income countries around the world where so much is, non-formal work stuff or wages as opposed to salaries, is, you're flowing in and out. And now we've had the gig economy for all this time. I think even the language we use, whether it's primary caregiver or primary breadwinner, just is not how most of us live in most of the world. We all have to do a little of it. And I think that fluidity is where you see couples, that kind of flexibility of, isn't it great that she's providing part of it so all the stress is not on you? And isn't it great if you're also doing part of the caregiving? Like this flowing in and out of these roles seems to be what in lots of the world, makes life better possible. And so I think helping men see it's great if we get deep joy from our work. I do. And I feel like I would find life pretty miserable if I didn't. But I think, just the importance of that, our care relationships, and that, how to help men feel that is such a source of being well in the world, and kind of not just me compared to you, but the us that comes in there. So I think for us, looking at how do we support men to live in a world that we are pushing toward full economic equality for women, right? The latest data from the World Economic Forum, who does the global gender gap, we're now only 120 something years away. We used to be 160 years away. But we're getting close. And in lots of households, it's already happened. I think we have to do what women were asking us to do forever, which was to say, make care visible and valued And there might be some anger of like, why didn't we do it before? Now you're doing it because men are doing more of the care work. Now you're taking it seriously. Well, yeah, that's true. But still, let's step in and say, my care relationships should be what give me the greatest happiness. And actually, most men who I talk to in different parts of the world, working or not working in paid work, if you get them in a calm moment of kind of what really matters to you, um, that's what will come to the top. If it's not about me measuring myself to the guy next door, about measuring me to some ideal that I'm seeing following online or on television or whatever, if it's really what sits in my heart, it's who do I care about. And so I think we need to we need to catch up with men. Men know this, they feel it. I think we need to catch up in terms of work policies, the stories we tell, what we hold up is what good manhood is about, to say care is what good manhood is about, and the rest is the rest.
And in researching your book, Melissa, Breadwinners, which again I read, it's wonderful. Recommend it for everyone. What surprised you the most about how female earners experience their relationships, in particular breadwinners?
Yeah, I think I came across a lot of the similar themes that Gary was talking about, but from a female perspective. So men still have this very kind of rigid view of where they fit in and where their identity aligns. But women have reconfigured their identity to be able to pursue goals at work, to be business leaders, to go into leadership. But the expectations in the home and the expectations of motherhood haven't changed. So we talk about equality more and more. Companies provide quotas, they publish gender pay gaps, but the gender pay gap still is it's not changing significantly. Women still drop out of the workforce when they become mothers. And so the ones that do end up in these breadwinner situations still end up taking on a lot of the load at home. And partly it is to do with the fact of these expectations. So they haven't kind of changed the other side of their identity, and they haven't talked about it maybe from the outset about how to divide tasks, because it's such a sensitive topic, because as a society we place so much on our self-worth for what we're earning, and because women have a lot of other identities to tap into, they maybe don't place as much self-worth on what they're earning because they're not judged for it in the way that men are. And so we find situations where women are actually protecting their male partner from the backlash of them not being the higher earner. I came across examples where women performatively let their lower earning or stay-at-home partners pay during the dinner because it was kind of seen important as for them to be the financial providers, or they kind of don't talk about what they're earning, or they play down. And one woman I spoke to, she's quite well known in the UK, I won't name her, but she said as she was becoming more and more successful, she noticed the decline of her partner's mental health go down steadily. And she was like, I tried not to become so successful, but someone had to pay the bills and I was being given these opportunities. So she was actually trying to reconfigure her success to protect him. And surprise, surprise, their marriage did break down, which is kind of a common pattern. So I think that's what surprised me most, the fact that this outside expectation has such a hold on us in such an irrational way that it affects our relationships, and the relationships that should make us happier, and we're letting it affect our relationships, which has massive implications for how kind of happy and mentally well we feel later in life.
And that leads into my question for Ed, who again, he's a financial therapist, and his wife's the breadwinner, and he can speak probably in even more detail on what the emotional undercurrents behind money tension are when she's earning more.
Yeah, Brian, I think I'm really having to hold myself together. Hearing Gary and Melissa talk is so validating of so many experiences that I've had both personally and I've seen professionally. And these questions I've really been trying to answer for 20 years. Um, you know, I met my wife 21 years ago. We just celebrated our 19th wedding anniversary this past week. And when I first met her, it was so exciting. She was finishing dental school and I was working as a firefighter. And I distinctly remember going back to the firehouse and saying, guys, I met this great gal. She's in dental school. And their first, like, before I could even say anything else, marry her. Uh, uh, okay, well, you don't want to know more about her? Like, is she nice? Is she kind to me? Anything? It just sticks in my mind so profoundly. But what started off as good fortune, she is an incredibly kind and thoughtful woman. But I did watch my mental health decline after we got married, and I couldn't articulate anything that I'm saying today then. These concepts were not even in my vernacular, and I don't think they were really in the general populace 20 years ago. But I watched my mental health decline. I remember going to an EAP counselor when I had shifted out of firefighting into a corporate job, and I was so lost and so confused about, I mean, one, I was career switching, but I was also trying to figure out, what does it mean that my wife is making, I think at that time she was making 4 to 5 times what I was making. And I literally was looking at, like, where's my career path? There's no way that I could ever even get close to equality with her in earnings. So what does this mean for me? And I couldn't even fully articulate that. That was the question I was wrestling with. Interesting enough, I got my MBA, I got my certified financial planner. I was trying to find a way to be able to match. I went to the Philippines on a fellowship to do microfinance work. And Gary, I'm interested in that work. But,
Yeah.
this is 17 years ago, 16 years ago. And that question in my head, they're supporting these women to make more money, which is fantastic in microfinance. But they're putting women all in lending groups, and the men are left outside of the conversation about the household finances. And I was just left with this question: what does this mean?
Yeah.
And so I've spent the last 20 years really in and out of this question, in and out of my own mental health, my own identity rigidity. I think that's a great way to describe it. That pressure of, what does it mean to be a performer? I stayed home with our firstborn for 3 or 4 years. I had my guy friends say, "Oh, it must be so nice to have a breadwinning wife," while I was at home going to play dates or trying to make play dates for my younger son and couldn't. Or I'd show up at the playground and there'd be a 20-to-1 ratio of women caring for children. And all that to say, I do see progress though in my local community, because I have job flexibility and time flexibility. I see men wearing children on their chest. I was at Cub Scouts and this dad just told me that his newest child was just born, and he got, I think, 8 weeks of paternity leave from his corporation. And so I do see the changes happening in the way the roles are being carried out. But today, this week, I'm traveling. I'm in Seattle with my wife. She had a business trip, and I tagged along. And I think conventionally in the past, it would have been the wife trailing the husband on a business trip and taking advantage. And so I'm telling people, "Oh, yeah, my wife's at this training." And there's still this small twinge that I'm
Yeah.
riding my wife's coattails when I should be working. So that's kind of a very personal story to this topic.
Ed, can I jump in on or Brian, can I jump in on the
Please do.
microcredit
Yeah.
example? Ed, I think it's great that you brought that up, and we've been a partner in a lot of, one of the success stories in the space of international development and gender equality has been a focus on women's economic empowerment. Whether it's, big programs like BRAC, et cetera, that, have said savings or access to credit or support for women financially is a huge game changer in terms of being able to leave a violent partner, being able to have access to do better in the work world. It doesn't do everything, but it's been like one of the success stories of international development work around the world. Almost always, it's kind of like men become an afterthought. And so some of the programs have seen, without those conversations, sometimes men feeling really threatened, there's actually an increase in violence against women who
Hmm.
participate in it. We, obviously we're trying to work to mitigate that, but part of it has been trying to say, we need those new opportunities for women. We need to, shed any idea that women aren't absolutely as competent as men in any space that we look at, including being economic providers. But I feel like we've not had what is the social space for men? What are the new scripts for men? And a lot of the work that we've done has been the male partners of women who are beneficiaries of the programs around benefits to him, his own mental health, how he can support. Sometimes we'll do as a very simple activity in some parts of the world, which is simply, we'll organize some activities where you hang out with the kids and she can participate in that activity, value that at a community level. So we make it not just me by myself, but me with other guys figuring this out. And I think, that's one of the challenges I'd say we have, particularly in the US, which is sort of, as we have a pretty thin access to lots of services, whether it's paid leave, support, subsidized childcare, we got to leave it up to lots of families and individuals to figure it out on their own. And I think our lesson from a number of lower income countries or global south countries has been, actually, you need to do this at kind of the community level. We need public spaces where other dads can interact and interact with moms and get access to those services. That this shouldn't be kind of always individual families figuring it out. Like, what's that proverbial village around us? And we're often not very good at that, the village building, because it's so much easier. I've had those moments as well of kind of the only stay-at-home dad, and it's so much easier if there's like another one in the room. Just as for women, it's been so important to have, you can't be the only C-suite woman. You need others in the space to say, this is not a strange space for me to be. They're not, I don't want to make those into false kind of parallels because there's lots of differences there, but the kind of, how do we make it not an individual conversation, but one that says, we gotta try this together, folks. Like, what can we learn, and how can we provide a collective support to families that are trying to figure this out?
Along those lines, Melissa, what advice would you give couples to rewrite that script when traditional gender roles are flipped?
Yeah, exactly. I suppose what's interesting about this conversation is we're talking about the social, which is one huge important aspect because men need other men in these spheres. I literally spoke to some men who said, I just didn't feel welcome in the baby groups. I just spoke to the nanny. But I think the personal is the one that's more hidden and the one that's even harder to get at. Like, how does that look in an individual relationship where someone like Ed 20 years ago didn't know how to vocalize what he was feeling, and then maybe his wife noticed that and probably didn't want to bring up, oh, okay, well, money's not important, because then it's very uncomfortable. So I think talking about money very openly at an early stage is massively important, because there's no script of how to divide earnings, how to share it, how to pool it. Like I see a lot of women fall into the trap where their partners think it's fair to share everything 50-50, but is it fair when the female or man is earning 30% of the household income, which means that one of them has fewer savings? So it's really unhealthy to think about it in a way where this money is mine and I will put only this into the household and you'll put the exact same amount, because if the household income is not considered as a whole, it creates this kind of unfairness from the outset. And as a species, I mean, fairness goes deep into our psychology. For anyone who has children and sees them even compare a glass of milk, in my case water, they were like, you've got more water than me. Like, it's so deeply bedded in, and we learn as we age that life isn't fair, and we internalize that, and we kind of learn not to talk about it, and it's massively damaging. You see the impact on difference in socioeconomic status. But in the household, we can combat it because this is meant to be our life partner. So we shouldn't let kind of inequality creep in, because we don't like it when things are unfair. It's the kind of a huge factor for any kind of argument. So it's so simple when you talk about it and say, just talk more, just communicate, tell each other how you're feeling. But if it was simple to do in practice, more people would do it. So I think we just need to keep telling people, have these conversations early on, have them before you have children, see the household income as joint. And if it's not joint because for whatever reason, make it proportionate, kind of see the family pursuits as a shared goal rather than your career, my career, and kind of understand that it's not going to be fair all the time. There's always kind of an ebb and flow of whose goals can be prioritized at any one moment.
For years now, I've been as running Modern Husbands. I have this like unique perspective where, from the financial standpoint, I'm reading the research behind things like bank account systems. Do you put all of your money together? Do you use ours, yours, and mine, et cetera? And then from the home labor perspective, like fair play facilitation, whatever it may be. And it's like these two things have been compartmentalized. And I believe that's a real problem, because we don't live in two separate worlds. It's one world. And I have resided on two rules of thumb for first-time married couples. Number one, strive for equal leisure time. And number two, again, as the research says, barring somebody being like a spendthrift, the other a tightwad, or maybe there's a second marriage, there are always reasons to have ours, yours, and mine. However, the research clearly has found for first-time married couples that having just a joint account, one account where you manage your world from, increases marital satisfaction. It actually shows causation. And that groundbreaking study was released last year. And the reason that I advocate for that in those circumstances, not every circumstance, it's very important to point out, is because it completely eliminates scorekeeping.
Yeah.
You're not looking at somebody saying, well, since you're earning this, you need to do more at home, or somebody looking at somebody who's doing more of the unpaid labor at home saying, well, you need to do more of this because I'm bringing in more there. None of that, I believe, is healthy. And if you have equal leisure time and you have one world, one account, it makes it easier. And again, that's not for everybody, but that seems to be what I've settled in on for most first-time married folks. Now, with that said, Ed, how can couples begin uncovering and undressing money shame or resentment in the relationship?
Oh my God. Can I just pass that off to Melissa or Gary? Like that? Um,
Because this dives into like what Melissa was talking about, Gary was talking about,
well,
of like, as Melissa was saying, women are like hiding that they're breadwinners
yeah,
because
yeah.
of what
No,
they're.
it's, look, naming shame alone is so challenging. As far as I understand psychology and the human condition, shame is the most profoundly painful state of mind that we can end up in, because it is the state of mind that says, I am bad. It's an identity statement that
Yeah.
I'm bad and unworthy,
Yeah.
and that there's tremendous psychic distress there. And yet we know that a lot of people turn money into identity issues. And so if they're not doing good with money, then they are bad. And so I think you have to, for so many of my clients, you try to gently walk into it and just name the shame that's in the room. And it's not easy because people don't want to even see it as shame when it is very clearly shame. And you see a very close link between shame and rage. And rage is not always the externalized, violent Hulk smash form of rage. It can be internalized and redirected into yourself. The the disease process around disease and shame relationship is very high, especially with like autoimmune and other self-destroying disease factors. And so we get into some pretty wicked relationships between money, identity, shame, disease processes. And so most of my clients have multiple co-occurring issues at the same time. I started working with a couple very recently where she had been the second marriage's third marriage for him, I think. But she had a very successful business. She had the capacity for a very successful business in her skill set. Her husband had some business operations skill sets. It built up, but she was the one making the money, even though he was helping support. But she ended up with autoimmune disease taking her out and impacting her ability to earn. So now they've had a massive income decrease, and they're trying to sort through all this. And I'm just sitting there thinking like, breadwinning woman, man, disease process knocks her out of her earning capacity. How is that unconsciously rebalancing the scales?
Yeah.
Puts him in a caregiving role. So sorry for the long meandering question, but professionally, there's this conceptualization piece when I'm working with my clients, what's really going on? And then there's what's the interventions to help try to lead them back. And for me, the antidote to shame is empathy and relational connection. And so one of the exercises I try to start getting couples to do as quick as possible is getting them to turn and face each other and actually see each other, their humanity eye to eye. I'll try to get them holding each other's hands, building physical connection. And it's amazing how that starts to reduce the shame, reduce the resentment that's built up. And resentment is so closely connected to shame, but resentment is a part of missed expectations. And there's so many unspoken expectations about what's fair and not fair.
Yeah.
And what does that mean at a deeper level? So I'll stop there, but yeah.
Yeah. And I was going to
What?
jump in.
Please jump in,
Go
Gary.
ahead, Brian. Yeah, can I jump in? Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. I was thinking about where we see a huge amount of shame internalized with men in our research as we've been measuring economic precarity. So basically, not how much you make or whether you're employed, but whether you feel that your employment offers you a sense of identity and a sense of stability. Men who feel economically precarious in our data are 16 times more likely to have thought about suicide in the past 2 weeks. It's the single largest factor that we find in our survey research associated with men's sense of basically mental unwellness. And partly is because, I think in the US, we so much have this sense of it's my responsibility. If I'm out of work, I'm not economically stable, it is turned into an individual failure. Now, there are obviously times when did I have the training? Was I doing my job? There are individual performance issues at work, but so much of our workplace at the moment is the whims of a global economy, who's in the White House, what's happening with tariffs, all the rest that leave you at the whims. And yet, this construct of manhood that we do is it's on me. It's a personal failure if my factory or my company closed and moved overseas or closed altogether. Men take that individual sense of shame. And I think it's a bit like, as a developmental psychologist, what we think about in terms of the impact of violence, of how we say it wasn't your fault. I think we part there around as you became, like that sense of that you're not responsible always. Sometimes you are for your economic failures. We've got to help men understand. And I think that's where I was very moved by, we get the couple to look at each other and say, we're in this together, right? This is not an individual failing on yours because of what's happening to your job versus my job. We're trying to, we will get through this if we do this together, and even better, if you've got others around you who are part of that conversation. So I think, I pull out of that just the importance of, one, that we as couples can talk about it. Men are so, we are the using the words I feel and then describing, those words of shame and uncertain, or I am anxious about these. These are words that, took me a couple of decades to get okay to say, but they seem so key. Now kind of, 32 years into being married, I feel like, wow, if I had known that a long time ago, how much easier it is if I can just honestly say, I'm anxious about this. Or the hardest one for me is, I don't know. Right? Because that's the other mastery part that we're supposed to get it. So anyway, Ed, you moved me on just men having those skills of just going, I don't know, I'm anxious. I don't know where to go on this. Can we figure this out together? That's when my day feels like just, like the burden unloaded, particularly if my partner can also, or somebody else around me, cannot just say, oh, get over it, right? Can say, I get you. Because that's the other part, right? The masculinity, patriarchy internalized in others who are like, I don't care. Get on with it, man. You got to tough it up.
Man up.
Man up. Yeah.
Melissa, do they say man up in England?
Yes, they do. I feel like probably it's not okay anymore, but definitely when I was in my early 20s, it was kind of said, I mean, even to other women, just take it on the chin. I think we see that now in the younger generation. They don't accept that kind of, let's just carry on and work as if we don't feel anything, but actually our mental health is massively important. So I think it's changing. I think it's more said in jest now.
Speaking of change, are there cultural shifts occurring that you're seeing that are helping the circumstances? And if so, what are they?
Definitely. I think the fact that we're talking about this now openly is a huge benefit. I think it's tricky. There's a term which I love, I've latched onto, that sociologists use, called structural lag. And it literally means that even though our mindset is changing, society lags behind. So we have these ideals, we have these solutions, we have ways of talking about it, but the infrastructure, the people who designed the workforce, the working hours has not changed suit, because it's tied to so many different parts of capitalism, productivity, working norms, different values between different generations. And so we definitely see a mismatch between what we need as a society versus what we want. So that's another reason why it's so challenging. Like, we know we need more flexibility at work, yet why are so many leaders now calling everyone back into the office when they know it will disproportionately affect caregivers? So yeah, we're not there yet, but I think the fact that we're talking about it, that there's more social media, there's more men talking about it. So every time when I was writing the book, my publisher kept saying, don't add too many things about sexism that's too entrenched in gender, make it appeal to the men, because they need to be part of the conversation. It's not us and them. It's not men doing it to women. It's we are all part of this system and this narrative that doesn't serve either of us. And so I think that's a really positive, empowering message, that we do need more men to be talking about it. We need more men to put family first. But we can't do that if they live in a society where they're expected to be at the office till 8 p.m. and sign on at 7 a.m. So I think there's a huge mismatch occurring. But I have hope. I'm an optimist.
Listeners have told us that they love the ideas we share on our podcast to manage money in the home as a team, but want more help than one episode can provide. That's why I'm excited to announce On the Same Page Consulting for corporations, couples, and individuals. Visit modernhusbands.com and click Our Services at the top of the page to learn more about how I can help you or your employees manage money in the home as a team. Again, that's modernhusbands.com. Now back to the show. Do you recognize, or do you find in your research, like, that culturally that we still have a lot of these, like, as Melissa put it, us being gender, like women versus men, like,
Yeah.
this is happening. We are victims as women, or we are victims as men. That is so deeply entrenched that it allows for the algorithms to pick up through this conflict economy of, like, starting with that, like, here's why men are the enemy, here's why women are the enemy, here's what men aren't doing, here's what women aren't doing. And how does that kind of play into these challenges that we're discussing?
Yeah, and the lag that Melissa talked about as well. I mean, I absolutely. I mean, I think we're the binary is so, framing of who we are, right? And the first questions we asked about a child coming into the world is not, kind of healthy or this or that. It's right, boy, girl. We are indeed, kind of stuck in instead of the 90% of stuff that we do that it's, that where we're genetically the same. We focus on kind of small differences and make them far bigger. And I absolutely agree that, the hard part, I think, for men has been to say, so what's our cause in this change, right? I think women have absolutely, we're talking about, my organization talks about men and masculinity because of work that women did to say, it's not okay that you put us in a box that we're not capable of doing X or Y. And a movement that said women are fully equal and capable, make room. We haven't figured out what is the movement for men to say we're fully capable of care. We can live in a world where women are equal. We can be emotionally more resonant and present. I think that script. And so, when you were saying that, Melissa, I was thinking about the lag of, the workplace shifted. We've tried to make I'm a girl dad, right? And so in some ways not easy. There were references to point to and say, Nina, you can be anything in the world. We can play, I'll give this example a lot. Days I remember where the morning was struggling with her, like, maybe don't wear the tutu to school, but she wanted to play tutus. And then the afternoon, right, we're playing astronaut and she's watching Star Trek Voyager with me or whatever. And she could look at Captain Janeway and go, like, that's somebody I want to be, that kick-ass, starship pilot. But I don't think we've had a similar conversation with boys and men about we can be, a breadwinner, and we can also be an amazing caregiver. and learn to braid our daughter's hair and play pretty princess and find deep meaning in that as much as being the one who sold that cool project at work that same day. So I think, Melissa, you're absolutely on it. Like we just the structures around us have shifted massively, that it doesn't, like, it's really hard unless somebody makes a lot of money that you can be a single breadwinner household.
Right.
Right. We've all got to be breadwinners and caregivers. And I think I kind of occasionally will say to men, like, somebody forgot to send us that memo. Like, we don't know how to do this. So, and I think we get social media that, sorry, had distracted me for a second there, is, it's so immediately responsive to, right? It's clickbait in terms of, if you're feeling precarious about that or a little nervous about it or confused, somebody has done a TikTok before you looked away and looked back up. I was just looking at one that was of a man crying that was really funny. Sorry about that. And it, it's just how much that grabs you immediately, right? That I think we've got to, like, slow down a bit and have the deeper conversation of what is new manhood in a world where, women can do it all. And we've got to step in as men and say, well, what's our part in this? Because my script, like, I need to add that. I need that add-on to my, I've got to download that new software because I missed that piece somewhere along the way.
I want to ask Melissa a question, and then have Ed build on Melissa's answer. And you wrote about this in your book, and it connected with me. As far as, like, the types of men who generally embrace relationships that include a female breadwinner. What types of men are they, and, like, how can you describe them, and what can we learn from them?
Yeah, so these were the men that embraced caregiving anyway. There's a researcher called Jasmine Calland who researched this, and she called them the F-it fathers, because they would go into their workplace and demand flexibility to prioritize their family. And if the workplace said no, they would say, well, I'm going to go find another job then, fine, if you're not valuing my time. So these were men who, she called it disregarding discourse in her paper. And this was an analysis of, thousands and thousands of comments and interviews. And the great irony is you can only do that when you're at a certain stage of your career, right? Where you can take the risk, where you're going to say, well, if your role doesn't serve me well, I'm going to find a company that does value it. So that was kind of on the professional sphere. But on the home sphere, I also spoke to a lot of dads who, through experience, because they'd seen their mother go out to work, or the opposite, in fact, where they had not had a present father, and they said, you know what, I'm going to change this for my child because I want to be there for my children. So these were dads who, again, similar to the F-it dads, they were prioritizing their family because they kind of saw that the meaning and importance of their family far outstripped any workplace or career goal. So I think it's really hard because we all live in a society that values certain kind of milestones, and you see it in interviews with young men where they talk about what's masculinity. Well, it means providing, it means being strong, being fit. It's very against it. But the men who did change this narrative actually redefined what masculinity meant to them, and sociologists call this caring masculinities. So the more that men care, the more they redefine masculinity is including caring, being more tolerant, even being more tolerant of same-sex relationships, being less sexist. So there's all these kind of positives, but they can still consider themselves a man's man, but a man's man doesn't have to be Mr. Mum. One of them in one of these studies literally said, I'm not Mr. Mum, I'm Mr. Dad. I can be a strong man. So I think it can coexist. We don't have to define masculinity in one way. Masculinity can and should involve caring. And I think that's quite attractive for a woman to see that if she's thinking about having a child with someone.
So with that as context, Ed, what is it that financial intimacy really looks like in these types of relationships when, you are, let's say the man is as you said, a fucking father, like I'm going to redefine what it means to be a provider, which I believe is extremely healthy, right? Because you can provide in far more ways than being a breadwinner. So, but how does that translate into financial intimacy in the relationships?
Well, I mean, I think one, just the word combination financial intimacy blows a lot of people's minds. I don't think that most people stop and think about money and being like, wow, that's not a topic I can get really intimate with my partner and experience actually increasing pleasure.
Well, maybe start by explaining financial intimacy, defining it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in my mind, I define financial intimacy as the ability of two intimate partners to talk openly, lovingly, compassionately about their shared financial life. And that includes both their hopes, dreams, and aspirations, as well as their fears, concerns, and anxieties. So, it's the full spectrum of experience. We've talked a lot about identity. They can talk about what it means to be a provider or not to be a provider, and to show up with non-judgment about that. And so I think it's really about this we experience that we're in this together, that we're creating something together. We, in the Western world, we're so individualistically focused that it trickles all the way down into our intimate relationships. And
Yeah.
I was just writing a blog post I'll be posting pretty recently is most of my couples engage in a competitive conversation pattern instead of a collaborative conversation pattern. And that's not any individual's response. That's a cultural problem. Is we train people to have competitive conversations, if not combative conversations. And that's why we think it's normal to beat each other up on social media, in the politics, in the business world. We train people in debate. We train people to win in conversations. And so that's what they're trying to do. And they bring it home into their intimate relationships. And it's just nonsense. There's no reason that we can't be having collaborative conversations, both culturally and within our intimate relationships. And there's a deep feedback loop. So before I go too far on a soapbox, I'll stop myself.
Yeah.
You know, when I started to kind of do what I do now, it started with me just simply saying, Googling, how can I be a great husband? And I feel like that all the emotions that we've been discussing and the challenges we've been discussing probably require that we are upfront about the fact that we're going against the current of society, and that when we love each other, we need to figure out ways to add somebody else in the boat to row against that current. And for men, oftentimes it is being somebody who's leading at home, somebody who's leading as a caregiver. And I think it's equally important, at least it has been in my relationship, where my wife has reinforced the importance of me being a provider in more ways than providing financially. And it's little things like just showing, as you mentioned, Gottman's research, right? You know, essentially 5 positive interactions to 1 negative one. Just showing appreciation for each other, even the little things, the things that I know sometimes people will say, hey, you're adults, you shouldn't have to say, hey, thanks for doing XYZ. The house looks great. Thanks for, but we're not robots, right? We're human beings. And I get that argument, but for me, it doesn't resonate. What resonates
It's BS. That argument
BS.
is such bullshit. I'm just going to call the bullshit card. Like, we have ego needs our whole life. We don't grow out of the need to be appreciated. We never outgrow that.
Exactly. So that's to me, that's what's helped me is the appreciation that I'm shown. And that's what I would encourage women who are female breadwinners is to point out the things that are being done in the home to make it easier for them to be great in the workforce and share that types of appreciation. Because if they're not the breadwinners anymore, if men aren't the breadwinners, they don't have that quantifiable number that says, oh, I'm doing a good job. Because that's an easy way to look at something and say, oh, I'm doing my job. And it doesn't work that way anymore.
Don't leave just yet. Be sure to like and subscribe before you do. And a reminder to visit modernhusbands.com if you're looking for money and home management support in your life. Just click the Our Services button at the top of the page. Again, that's at modernhusbands.com. And many thanks to our co-hosts, our guests, and of course, all of you for joining today.